Title: I woke up as a noble, but it's not what it seems. Chapter 1, A Second Chance or a Nightmare. When Iris Lennox woke up, the overwhelming sensation of silken sheets beneath her fingertips and the sight of an opulent canopy overhead struck her like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't her cramped apartment or her regular morning. She bolted upright, her heart racing as her surroundings came into focus. Marble floors, golden embellishments on the walls, and a massive mirror reflecting the image of someone who wasn't her. Long, flowing chestnut hair, a porcelain complexion, and emerald green eyes stared back. She touched her face in disbelief. I'm someone else? After a frantic search through her new surroundings, she found a diary that revealed her identity: Iris Lennox, the second daughter of the prestigious Lennox family, known for their immense wealth and social power. Iris wasn't just any noblewoman. She was the spoiled, carefree daughter with little responsibility or expectation placed upon her. At least I don't have to work myself to the bone anymore, she muttered, sitting on the edge of her lavish bed. Good food, no deadlines, no rent. This could actually be perfect. The start of the fantasy. The first week in this new world was bliss. She indulged in the luxurious lifestyle, dresses tailored to perfection, decadent meals that would make Michelin star chefs weep, and a massive estate to explore. Everyone treated her like royalty, and she leaned into the role with enthusiasm. Things became even better when a letter arrived from her supposed fiancé, Damien Ravencroft. The letter was formal, expressing his eagerness to meet her. According to the diary, Damien was a wealthy and powerful duke, blessed with unmatched beauty and influence. Iris was thrilled at the prospect of meeting her handsome future husband. This really is a romance fantasy, she mused, twirling in front of a mirror in a gown tailored specifically for their upcoming meeting. When Damien arrived, Iris was struck speechless. His jet-black hair fell in soft waves, framing his sharp features and piercing silver eyes. He bowed before her with an elegance that took her breath away. I will do my best to be the partner you deserve, Lady Iris, he said, his voice deep and soothing. Iris blushed, her heart fluttering. The pleasure's mine, Duke Ravencroft. The first signs of trouble. However, as the days passed, unsettling things began to happen. It started with small oddities, the faint sound of whispers in the halls, mirrors that seemed to flicker when she looked away, and the overwhelming sensation of being watched. She dismissed these as her imagination. After all, this was a massive mansion, and she was still adjusting to her new reality. But then, the nightmares began. In her dreams, she wandered through a dark, desolate version of the Lennox estate. Shadows loomed over her, and disembodied voices whispered her name. Every time she tried to run, she found herself in front of a locked door with blood seeping from its edges. She would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding like a drum. The most chilling part? The same door existed in real life, hidden in a forgotten wing of the mansion. A warning unheeded. One day, while strolling in the garden, Iris encountered an old maid who had served the Lennox family for decades. The woman's face was etched with worry as she gripped Iris's arm. Lady Iris, she whispered, her voice trembling. You must leave the manor before it's too late. What are you talking about? Iris asked, confused. This place, it is cursed. The Lennox family, they've kept secrets buried for generations. Whatever you do, stay away from the East Wing. Before Iris could press further, the maid was pulled away by another servant, leaving her with more questions than answers. The door in the East Wing. Unable to resist her curiosity, Iris ventured into the forbidden East Wing later that night. The air grew colder with every step she took, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of her breathing. When she reached the door from her nightmares, she hesitated. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Lady Iris, I would advise against that. She turned sharply to see Damien standing behind her, his expression unreadable. His usually warm silver eyes seemed darker, almost menacing in the dim light. Damien, she stammered. Why are you here? I could ask you the same, he said, his tone calm but firm. This door is off limits for a reason. But why? What's behind it? He stepped closer, towering over her. Some questions are better left unanswered. The intensity of his gaze made her step back. She nodded reluctantly and allowed him to escort her back to her room, but her mind was ablaze with questions. What was Damien hiding? And why did it feel like he wasn't just protecting her from the door, but the door from her? The horrors begin. The next morning, Iris woke up to find strange scratches on her arms and legs, as if something had clawed at her in her sleep. When she asked the servants about it, they exchanged nervous glances and insisted she must have done it to herself. As the days turned into weeks, the occurrences grew more frequent and more sinister, objects moving on their own, whispers turning into screams, and shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision. Iris began to feel like she was losing her grip on reality. The cliffhanger. One night, driven by desperation, Iris decided to confront Damien. She stormed into his study, her voice shaking as she demanded answers. "What are you hiding from me?" she asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What's behind that door, and why does it feel like this house is alive?" Damien sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You weren't supposed to find out this way." "Find out what?" He locked eyes with her, his expression somber. "Iris, you were never meant to live past your engagement." Her blood ran cold. What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the door to his study slammed shut on its own, and the shadows in the room began to writhe like living creatures. Damien's expression darkened. "It's too late," he said grimly. "They've already noticed you." Chapter 2, The Shadow's Warning. Iris's heart pounded in her chest as Damien's cryptic words hung heavy in the air. The study, once bathed in warm golden light, now felt suffocating. The shadows writhed like serpents, stretching and curling unnaturally. A guttural whisper filled the room, speaking in a language she didn't understand. What is this?" Iris stammered, backing away toward the nearest wall. Damien stood still, his silver eyes glinting in the dim light, though his jaw tightened with tension. "Stay close to me," he commanded, stepping forward and pulling her to his side. "They're testing you." "Testing me?" she gasped, clutching his arm. "What are they?" Before Damien could answer, the shadows converged in the center of the room, coalescing into a grotesque figure. It had no clear form, its body shifting like smoke, but its glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness. "Why has she come here?" the entity hissed, its voice like nails scraping against metal. "She has no intention of interfering," Damien replied, his voice steady. "She was never meant to be involved." "Liar," the creature growled. It turned its gaze to Iris, who froze under its glare. "You've already seen too much." Iris's legs felt like lead as the shadow surged toward her. Before it could reach her, Damien raised his hand, and a sudden burst of light erupted from his palm, forcing the creature to retreat. "That's enough," Damien said, his voice low and dangerous. "She's under my protection." The shadow lingered for a moment, its form twisting as if considering its next move. Then, with a guttural snarl, it dissipated into the air, leaving the room in eerie silence. The confession. Iris's knees buckled, and she sank into a nearby chair, her hands trembling. What was that thing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Damien knelt in front of her, his expression uncharacteristically soft. "A guardian of the manor. One of many." "Guardian?" She let out a hollow laugh. "That thing didn't seem very protective." "It doesn't guard you," Damien admitted, his tone heavy. "It guards the secrets of the Lennox family. And you've come dangerously close to uncovering them." Her breath hitched as his words sank in. "So, the door in the east wing is one of those secrets," Damien interrupted. "A secret that could cost you your life if you continue to pursue it." "But why? Why would something like that exist in the first place?" Iris's voice rose, panic creeping into her tone. "Why are there creatures like that in this house? What is this family hiding?" Damien hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "The Lennox family is bound by a curse." The curse revealed. Iris's heart skipped a beat. "A curse? What kind of curse? Damien stood and paced the room, his expression grim. Centuries ago, the first patriarch of the Lennox family made a deal with forces he didn't fully understand. In exchange for immense wealth and power, he offered something in return, the souls of his descendants. Iris stared at him, her blood running cold. Souls? You're telling me this family sacrifices people? Not quite, Damien said, stopping to face her. The curse demands that every generation of Lennox heirs must uphold the pact, or the entire family will face destruction. The guardians you saw are there to ensure compliance. And me? Iris asked, her voice trembling. What does this have to do with me? You're not directly tied to the curse, Damien admitted, but as a member of the family, you're considered a potential threat. If you dig too deep, the guardians won't hesitate to remove you. A pact of protection. Iris's mind raced. The luxurious life she had enjoyed over the past weeks now felt like a gilded cage, hiding something far darker. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? She demanded, standing abruptly. How was I supposed to know what I was walking into? I thought I could protect you, Damien said quietly. That's why I stayed close. I didn't think you'd stumble upon the East Wing so soon. She laughed bitterly. So I was just supposed to live here blissfully ignorant while being watched by those things? It was for your safety, Damien said, stepping closer. Iris, listen to me. The less you know, the safer you are. But now that you've seen them, you need to be cautious. And if I'm not, she challenged, meeting his gaze. His eyes darkened. Then they'll take matters into their own hands. A new resolve. That night, as Iris lay in her bed, sleep eluded her. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, each revelation more unsettling than the last. The curse, the guardians, the door in the East Wing, it all felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But one thought stood out above the rest: if she stayed ignorant, she would always be a pawn in this dangerous game. I won't live in fear, she whispered to herself, gripping the bedsheets tightly. If this family is hiding something, I'll find out what it is. No matter the cost. As the moonlight streamed through her window, Iris made a silent vow: she would uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting the horrors lurking in the shadows. Chapter 3: The East Wing's Secrets. The following days in the manor were tense, with the weight of the previous night's revelations hanging over Iris. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the ancient walls, made her heart race. She couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were watching, waiting. But more than that, a sense of determination began to rise within her. She couldn't let fear control her life anymore. The curse, the guardians, and the mysterious door in the East Wing, she needed to know what was behind it all. As she sat at breakfast, picking at her food in a daze, Damien appeared at the door, his usual calm demeanor hiding the underlying tension in his posture. His eyes scanned the room before settling on her. Iris, he said, voice low but urgent. We need to talk. She stood, brushing past him and moving toward the garden. The cool morning air felt refreshing against her skin, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside her. She didn't look at him as she spoke, her gaze focused on the flowers in bloom. You don't have to protect me, Damien, she said quietly, her voice steady but firm. I don't want to live in ignorance. If this family is cursed, then I want to know everything. He followed her in silence, hands tucked into his coat pockets. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully, as if afraid of what he might reveal. You don't understand the dangers, Iris, he said finally, his voice tight. It's not just about knowledge. The deeper you dig, the harder it becomes to escape. I don't plan on escaping, Iris replied, turning to face him. I'm not running away from this. I need to know the truth. Damien met her gaze, his expression conflicted. You have no idea what you're asking for. I've made my decision, Iris said, her voice unwavering. Now, tell me what's behind the door in the East Wing. Damien's eyes darkened. For a moment, it seemed as if he would refuse to tell her. But after a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. The truth is worse than you think. there's a reason why the door is locked. There's something in there, something the family has kept hidden for generations. And if you go in, you may not come back. The truth behind the door. That night, Iris lay in bed, wide awake, her mind racing. The words Damien had spoken replayed in her head, something the family has kept hidden for generations. What could it be? And why had they locked it away? Her curiosity gnawed at her, pulling her toward the east wing. She knew it was dangerous, but the pull of the unknown was stronger than her fear. She had to see what lay behind that door. She had to understand. After hours of tossing and turning, she finally made up her mind. She would find the key to the east wing and uncover the truth, whatever it might be. As she crept down the hall in the dead of night, her heart beat loudly in her chest. The manor seemed to be holding its breath, the silence oppressive. She moved swiftly but carefully, passing through the grand hallways with only the faintest glimmer of moonlight illuminating her path. At last, she reached the east wing. The door loomed before her, ancient and imposing, as if it had been waiting for her. The lock was intricate, but she'd been watching the servants carefully, and she knew where the key was hidden. With trembling hands, she retrieved the key from the drawer in the library and inserted it into the lock. The door creaked open slowly, revealing an unfamiliar room. The air inside was thick, musty with the scent of decay, and the walls were lined with old, dusty furniture. But what caught her attention immediately was the large, ornate mirror standing against the far wall. It seemed out of place, its surface untouched by the dust that covered everything else in the room. As she stepped closer, Iris felt a cold chill sweep over her. Her reflection was distorted, not like a regular mirror. The image before her flickered, as if it wasn't truly her. And then, the reflection moved. The mirror's truth. Iris gasped, stumbling back as the figure in the mirror stepped forward, its eyes glowing a deep crimson. It was a woman, but not entirely. Her features were sharp, almost inhuman, and her mouth twisted into a twisted, mocking grin. "You've come," the woman in the mirror said, her voice eerie and hollow. "You've come to see what was never meant to be seen." Iris's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to steady her breathing. What are you?" The figure in the mirror tilted her head, as if amused by the question. "I am the truth, the secret the Lennox family has kept hidden for centuries. I am what was locked away. I am the price they paid for their power." The mirror woman's smile grew wider, almost predatory. "You're just like them, aren't you? Desperate to know everything, no matter the cost." Iris's blood ran cold. "The price they paid? What do you mean?" The figure stepped closer to the glass, and for the first time, Iris could see the full scope of its appearance. Her skin was pale and cracked, as though it had been hollowed out long ago. Her eyes burned with the intensity of 1,000 unspoken truths. "You see," the woman said softly, her voice dripping with malice, "the Lennox family made a deal, yes. But it wasn't just their souls they offered. They offered a part of themselves, their humanity." The woman in the mirror smiled. "And now you, too, are part of that curse. You can't escape it. The price of knowledge." Iris staggered back from the mirror, her breath shallow, her thoughts in chaos. The reflection stared back at her with a cruel, knowing smile, as though it had anticipated her every move. She was in too deep now. The curse, the deal with dark forces, and the horrible truth hidden within the family, she couldn't walk away. Not anymore. Damien's warning echoed in her mind, but it was too late. She had opened the door, and now there was no turning back. The shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, as if closing in around her. "Iris," Damien's voice came from behind her, sharp and full of urgency. "Get away from the mirror. It's not safe." But Iris didn't listen. She couldn't. The reflection of the woman in the mirror was calling her, beckoning her to understand the full extent of the curse, and what it meant for her. And as the room grew colder, darker, Iris realized that her quest for the truth had only just begun. Chapter 4, The Curse Unveiled. Iris stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as Damien's voice grew louder behind her. The words the figure in the mirror had spoken echoed in her ears, each one pulling her deeper into a world she didn't understand. The coldness in the room seemed to seep into her very bones, but it wasn't the chill of the manor. No, this was something much darker. Something ancient. Damien rushed to her side, his hand gripping her arm firmly, pulling her away from the mirror. She resisted for a moment, but his touch was insistent, and finally, she let him guide her away. The figure in the mirror, though, remained, watching them with its terrifying, knowing eyes. "I told you it wasn't safe," Damien muttered, his voice strained. His usual calmness had evaporated, replaced by a rare urgency that sent a shiver down Iris's spine. "I need to understand," Iris replied, her voice barely a whisper, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. What did she mean by the curse? The price they paid? Damien's face tightened. He glanced at the mirror one last time, as if considering whether to speak, before guiding Iris out of the room. "Not here," he said urgently. "We need to go somewhere safe. A hidden legacy." Damien led Iris to a small, secluded library deep within the manor. The air was thick with the scent of old books, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient tomes. He closed the door behind them, ensuring they were alone before turning to face her. "There are things you need to know," he said quietly, his gaze dark and full of burden. "Things about the Lennox family, and about you." Iris's eyes searched his face, trying to read him, but there was a deep sadness there, a weight he hadn't shared with her yet. She felt a surge of emotion, fear, yes, but also a fierce need to understand the truth. She had to know what the mirror woman had meant, why the family had kept such dark secrets. "The curse," she prompted. "What's it really about?" Damien exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He seemed torn, as though he were debating whether to reveal the full extent of what he knew. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and almost regretful. "It's a blood curse. The Lennox family made a pact many generations ago, one that granted them wealth and power beyond imagination. But in return, they had to give up their souls, part of them, at least. The curse binds every member of the family to a horrific fate. It's passed down from generation to generation." Iris felt her stomach drop. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" Damien's eyes darkened. "You weren't supposed to know." "No one was. The curse grows stronger with each passing generation. And now, it's your turn." Her breath caught in her throat. "My turn?" Damien nodded. "You are part of the bloodline, Iris. The curse is yours, too. The mirror you saw, that was a reflection of what the Lennox family has become over the years. A twisted, hollow shell, bound by the pact. And now, it's your burden." Iris felt a chill grip her heart. She took a step back, as if trying to distance herself from the reality of it all. "But the figure in the mirror," she said, "I couldn't escape. Does that mean?" Damien nodded solemnly. "The curse is not something you can outrun. It's part of who you are now. But there's one thing we can try. There may be a way to break it. If we can find the original pact and destroy it, the curse might be lifted. But..." He trailed off, and Iris looked at him, a sense of dread creeping into her heart. "But breaking the curse comes with a price," he said softly. "It's not without sacrifice. And we don't know what that sacrifice will be yet. The path forward." Iris took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had always prided herself on being able to think rationally, even in the face of danger. But now, the world around her had shattered. Everything she thought she knew about her life, about her family, was a lie. She wasn't just a lady of leisure, a rich woman with a gilded future. No. She was caught in something much darker. "I want to try," she said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. "I won't let this define me." Damien studied her with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I'm asking for a choice," Iris replied. "To fight back. To take control of my life." For the first time, Damien allowed a small, rueful smile to cross his lips. "Then I'll help you." But we have to move carefully. The family will stop at nothing to protect the curse. The first clue. The days that followed were filled with secrecy. Damien took Iris to various hidden corners of the manor, places that had once seemed ordinary but were now filled with ominous significance. They searched through old family documents, letters, and books, each page revealing more of the family's dark past. It wasn't until they reached the crypts beneath the manor that they found their first clue. The tombstones in the underground chamber were weathered, their inscriptions worn with age. But one stood out, a family crest inscribed with an unfamiliar symbol. "This is it," Damien said, his voice barely above a whisper as he traced the engraving. "This symbol, it's connected to the original pact. It's said that the key to breaking the curse is hidden somewhere in this crypt." Iris's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of their search pressing down on her. Every step they took, every clue they uncovered, brought them closer to the truth, but it also brought them closer to danger. A dangerous revelation. As they continued to search, Iris began to feel the effects of the curse more acutely. Strange things began to happen around her, objects shifting out of place, whispers in the halls, and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The mirror woman's presence lingered, like a phantom that wouldn't leave. One evening, as they sat in the library, a knock on the door interrupted their quiet conversation. Damien tensed, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his side. Iris felt a chill run down her spine. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice betraying her anxiety. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room, a man dressed in dark robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. "I've come for her," the man said, his voice low and menacing. Damien's eyes narrowed. "You're too late." To be continued. The figure in the doorway remained silent, the tension in the air thick enough to suffocate. Iris stood, her breath shallow, as the shadows seemed to creep closer. The story was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The curse, the dark forces at play, and the unknown dangers ahead, all of it loomed over Iris as she faced the consequences of the choices she had made. In the end, would breaking the curse be worth the cost? Chapter 5, A Test of Loyalty. The figure in the doorway remained unmoving, his presence overwhelming, as if the very air around him thickened with each passing second. Iris could feel the weight of his gaze, even though she couldn't see his eyes. The shadows from the corners of the room seemed to elongate, reaching toward them with a creeping inevitability. "Damien," Iris whispered, her voice trembling slightly. She wanted to reach out, but her feet felt as if they were cemented to the ground, paralyzed by the unknown danger before her. Damien's hand tightened around the hilt of the knife at his side. He stood in front of Iris protectively, his eyes never leaving the man at the door. "I warned you, Dorian," Damien said in a low, controlled voice. "If you think you can just waltz in here and claim her, you're mistaken." The man, Dorian, tilted his head slightly as though he was considering Damien's words. A cold, mocking smile slowly crept across his lips, and his voice echoed like a distant murmur. "You can't stop what's already begun. The curse is in motion, and the one who bears it cannot escape it, no matter how hard they try." Iris's heart raced, her hands clammy, but something in the way Dorian spoke struck her to the core. "What do you mean? What do you want with me?" she demanded, trying to steady her voice despite the pounding in her chest. Dorian took a slow step forward, his footsteps unnervingly silent. "I want nothing from you, dear Rose. I'm simply the messenger, here to remind you of the price you'll pay for your family's sins." "But," he paused, his voice darkening, "if you truly think you can break the curse, then you'll need to prove your worth." Damien's jaw clenched. "You want a sacrifice, don't you? Something to make sure we don't get any funny ideas?" Dorian's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold and calculating. "Not just a sacrifice, Damien. A choice. The curse was always meant to be broken, but only one of you can live with the consequences. Only one of you will be free of it. The other," he trailed off, letting the words hang in the air like an ominous warning. Iris felt a chill run through her spine as his words sank in. She could almost hear the echoes of the ancient pact, its hold on her growing stronger with each moment. She glanced at Damien, unsure of what to do next. Damien's voice broke through her thoughts, calm but resolute. "If you think you can manipulate us with your threats, you're wrong, Dorian. You don't have the power you once did." Dorian let out a soft laugh, almost mocking, as if Damien's words were nothing but an amusing distraction. "Oh, Damien, you really don't understand, do you? The rules have changed. There's no more playing by the old ways." His eyes flicked to Iris, his smile growing darker. "But I suppose that's why I'm here. You'll both have to make a decision, sooner or later. The curse demands it." Iris felt a lump form in her throat, her mind racing. There was so much she still didn't understand, so many unknowns surrounding her, her family, her role in all of this, the pact, the curse, and now Dorian. Everything was becoming too much to process in one go. But she knew one thing for sure, she wouldn't let herself be controlled. Not again. "Leave us," Iris said, her voice sharp, though her body trembled with uncertainty. She had no idea if her words had any power over him, but she would not cower. "Not now." Dorian's grin faltered for a split second, before his gaze grew more calculating, like a predator who had just been given a challenge. "You'll regret this," he said softly, before turning and slowly walking out of the room, his figure disappearing into the dark hallway. As the door clicked shut behind him, Iris let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. The room seemed to lighten, but the lingering tension still hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. A new resolve. Iris stood still for a moment, processing what had just happened. The encounter with Dorian had left her shaken, but the anger bubbling inside her didn't allow her to stay in fear for long. This curse that had haunted her family for generations, wasn't going to be the thing that defined her. She wouldn't allow it. "Damien," she said quietly, her voice a mix of resolve and exhaustion. "We need to find a way to break this, and I won't let fear stop me." Whatever Dorian said, we can't give up. Damien stood across from her, his posture stiff, eyes narrowed. He had clearly been affected by the encounter as well, but his gaze softened as he met her determined eyes. "I know you're scared, Iris," he said quietly, his tone gentle despite the gravity of their situation. "But we have to be careful. This is no longer just about breaking the curse, it's about surviving it." Iris took a step toward him, feeling a surge of warmth and trust for the first time in what felt like forever. Damien had been her protector and confidant, but now, she realized, he was also someone she needed to fight beside. She wasn't alone anymore. "I'm not going to run away anymore," Iris said firmly, her voice full of purpose. "Not from the curse, not from Dorian, and certainly not from the truth. We need to end this for good." Damien studied her for a long moment before nodding, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Then we'll do it together," he agreed. "But be ready, Iris. Dorian wasn't the only one watching. There are others out there who want this curse to stay in place. And they won't let you walk away from it without a fight. The price of breaking the curse." As the days passed, Iris and Damien delved deeper into the mystery of the curse. They explored more hidden chambers within the manor, uncovered forgotten family journals, and discovered cryptic symbols that seemed to offer clues. But each step forward only raised more questions. Then, one night, Iris had a vivid dream, a vision that felt too real to be just a dream. She saw her ancestors, trapped in a never-ending loop of suffering, bound by the very curse she was trying to escape. In the dream, one of them, a woman who resembled Iris, turned to her and whispered, "To break the curse, you must destroy the heart of the pact. But beware, for in doing so, you will sever the only thread connecting your soul to this world." Iris woke up with a start, her heart racing. The message was clear, breaking the curse would come at a tremendous cost. She would have to choose between her freedom and her existence. The thought weighed heavily on her, but she knew one thing, she wasn't going to let the curse win. A fateful decision. As Iris and Damien stood before the altar of the ancient family chapel, where the original pact was rumored to be hidden, Iris felt the full weight of her decision bearing down on her. She could sense the invisible presence of the curse, like a dark cloud hovering above her, threatening to consume her. Damien reached out, his hand brushing hers in a silent gesture of support. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "We can leave. We can start over." But Iris shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't run anymore. Not from the truth, not from my past. This is something I have to do." She stepped forward, her resolve strengthening with each step. The time for hesitation had passed. She had already made her decision. The curse would end tonight, one way or another. To be continued. The air in the chapel grew colder, the silence heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. Iris stood before the altar, her heart in her throat, knowing that whatever lay beyond this moment would change everything. There would be no turning back. Chapter 6, The Heart of the Pact. Iris stood at the altar, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the cold stone surface of the ancient altar. The air around her felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the very walls of the chapel were holding their breath. Damien stood by her side, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos swirling inside her. The weight of their mission hung over them, both of them acutely aware that their next move could change everything. The altar was adorned with intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to dance in the flickering candlelight. Her eyes traced the shapes, the lines that had been etched into the stone for centuries, as though they were guiding her towards something she couldn't yet fully comprehend. "Iris," Damien said softly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Are you sure about this? Once we break the curse, there's no going back. You'll have to make a choice. A final one." Iris turned to him, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. The vision from her dream still haunted her, the words of her ancestor echoing in her mind. She would either break the curse and sever the tie between her soul and this world, or she would stay bound by the legacy of suffering, unable to escape. There was no middle ground. "I've made my choice," she said firmly, meeting Damien's gaze with unwavering determination. "This curse has plagued my family for far too long. I can't let it continue any longer." Damien's face softened, his expression filled with both pride and sadness. "I won't let you face this alone, Iris. Whatever happens, I'm here." His words were a balm to her frayed nerves, grounding her in the moment. She had never felt more sure of anything in her life. This was her fight, but Damien's unwavering support made it possible. Taking a deep breath, Iris turned back to the altar, her fingers grazing the edge of the stone. She could feel the pulse of ancient magic, the faint thrum of power that had kept the curse alive all these years. But it was time to end it. The symbol carved into the altar glowed faintly, reacting to her touch. Her heart raced as the carvings began to shift, the stone walls around them rumbling with an ancient power awakening. A low, guttural voice echoed through the chapel, its source unknown. "The heart of the pact is near, but know this, Rose, the price of breaking it will be your soul," the voice warned, the words a cruel reminder of the cost that awaited her. Iris didn't flinch. She had come too far to turn back now. She pressed her palm against the altar, feeling the warmth of the stone as it pulsed under her hand. "Let it end," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. As if responding to her plea, the altar shifted, the stone parts moving apart to reveal a hidden compartment beneath. Inside, an object lay shrouded in velvet cloth. Iris's heart skipped a beat as she lifted the cloth, revealing a small, crystal heart, glowing with an eerie, ethereal light. It was the heart of the pact, the very source of the curse. The moment Iris touched the heart, a sharp, searing pain shot through her chest, and the world around her seemed to twist and warp. Her vision blurred as she collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The pain intensified, like 1,000 needles piercing her skin, as the curse's magic fought against her attempt to destroy it. Damien was by her side in an instant, his hands gripping her shoulders, his voice frantic. "Iris. No. Don't do this. You can still pull away, we can find another way." But Iris could barely hear him over the roaring in her ears. The heart seemed to pulse in her hand, feeding on her strength, drawing the life force from her very soul. She knew this was the price. She had known it from the moment Dorian had spoken the curse's name. But even knowing it didn't make it any easier. I can't turn back, she gasped, her voice a mere whisper. Damien's face was a mask of pain and helplessness. Iris, please. His hands were shaking as he tried to lift her, but the force of the magic seemed to repel him. With every passing second, the pain grew unbearable. Iris could feel herself slipping away, the edges of her consciousness blurring as if she were sinking into darkness. But through the haze, she clung to one thought, her family, the legacy she had been born into, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, the curse could end with her. I'm breaking the cycle, Iris whispered through gritted teeth, her hand tightening around the heart. The glow of the crystal heart intensified, blinding in its brilliance. Iris could feel the curse unraveling, the bonds of magic that had held her family for generations breaking apart. The room around her began to shake, the walls groaning with the force of the curse being destroyed. Suddenly, there was a flash of white light, and the pain disappeared. Iris opened her eyes, unsure of what had happened. The chapel was silent now, the oppressive weight of the curse lifted. She felt different. Lighter. She was no longer tethered to the curse, no longer bound by the past. But the cost was clear. She could feel the emptiness where the connection to her family's legacy had once been, and the haunting realization that she had severed the thread between her soul and the world. Iris, Damien's voice was soft, filled with a mix of awe and sadness. You did it, you broke the curse. Iris could only nod, her voice lost in the aftermath of the battle she had just fought. She felt as if she had been freed, but at what cost? The world around her seemed unfamiliar, as though she were seeing it for the first time. I don't know what's next, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien's hand was warm on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. You're not alone, Iris. Epilogue, a new beginning. As the days passed, Iris began to adjust to her new life. The weight of the curse no longer loomed over her, but its absence left a hollow space within her. She was free, but that freedom came with its own set of challenges. Damien remained by her side, steadfast in his support, even as Iris grappled with the loss of her former identity. They traveled together, seeking a place where Iris could rediscover herself, free from the shadows of the past. But there was a part of her that couldn't forget what she had done. The decision to break the curse had been the hardest choice of her life, but it had been the only one that mattered. Now, with the curse lifted, she could live without fear, without the constraints of her family's legacy. And perhaps, in time, she would find peace. For now, though, she was content to walk this new path beside the man who had stood by her through it all. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. Chapter 7, Shadows of the Past. It had been weeks since the curse was broken, and still, Iris found herself waking in the quiet hours of the morning, her heart restless. The weight of the past had been lifted, but there was a lingering sense of something undefined, a hollow ache deep inside her. It was as though breaking the curse hadn't just freed her from the bonds of her family's tragic history, it had also severed her connection to everything she had known, everything she had once been. Damien had been her constant companion, ever present, offering solace with his gentle presence, but even he couldn't quell the storm brewing inside her heart. The world around her had become unrecognizable, and with each passing day, she felt more like a stranger in her own life. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the windows of their modest but peaceful cottage, Iris found herself standing at the edge of a small cliff, gazing out over the valley below. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a fleeting moment, she felt connected to something bigger, something beyond herself. But the connection was short-lived. Her thoughts returned to the consequences of her actions, the severing of the curse, the choice she had made to let go of the past. Iris? Damien's voice cut through her thoughts, and she turned to find him standing just behind her, his eyes filled with concern. I'm fine, she said quietly, forcing a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Just thinking. Damien didn't seem convinced. He stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. About the past? Iris nodded, her gaze returning to the valley below. About everything. I thought breaking the curse would bring peace, but instead, I feel lost. I don't know who I am anymore, Damien. He was silent for a moment, and Iris could feel the weight of his gaze on her, the depth of his understanding. It was a silence filled with empathy, with the unspoken knowledge that he could never fully grasp the enormity of her transformation. She had been born into a legacy of darkness, and with one choice, she had erased that legacy, only to find herself standing in the void it left behind. You don't have to know everything right now, Damien said softly, his thumb brushing over her shoulder in a soothing gesture. You've already done the hardest thing, Iris. You've freed yourself. The rest, it'll come in time. Iris met his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. Damien had always been the one person who had believed in her, who had stood by her even when the world seemed to be unraveling around them. But this was something she had to do on her own. I don't want to be defined by the curse anymore, Iris whispered, her voice trembling slightly. But I don't know who I am without it. Damien's hand tightened on her shoulder, pulling her into a brief but meaningful embrace. Then take the time you need. You've earned it. Iris closed her eyes, savoring the warmth of his embrace. She knew that his love and support were invaluable, but she also knew that this journey was hers alone. The path forward would be uncertain, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but she would face it with the strength she had found within herself. Chapter 8, A Glimpse of the Future. Days turned into weeks, and Iris found herself slowly adapting to her new reality. The sense of uncertainty that had plagued her in the aftermath of breaking the curse began to ease. She started to reclaim pieces of herself, small fragments of who she had been before the curse had ever touched her life. She learned to appreciate the simplicity of daily life, walking through the fields of wildflowers, reading by the fire, sharing quiet moments with Damien. They had no grand plans, no looming mission or curse to break. For the first time, Iris could simply exist. But the weight of the unknown still lingered. The question of her future, of what her life meant beyond the curse, remained unanswered. As much as she had broken free from the shackles of her family's history, she was still searching for her own identity. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Iris and Damien sat together outside their cottage. The air was cool, and the smell of fresh earth and pine trees filled the air. It was peaceful, more peaceful than Iris had ever known. I've been thinking, Damien said, his voice low, almost hesitant. About the future. About us. Iris turned to him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. And what have you been thinking? Damien paused, his expression thoughtful. I know you've been through so much. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. No matter what you decide, I'll be by your side. You don't have to carry the burden of the past alone anymore. Iris's heart swelled at his words, and she reached for his hand. I know. And I'm grateful. But I think I need to find my own way. I need to understand who I am now that the curse is gone. I can't keep looking for answers in the past. Damien's eyes softened, and he nodded in understanding. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, no matter what. For the first time in a long while, Iris felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer feared it. She had the freedom to choose her own path, and that was enough. As the night settled in around them, the stars twinkling above, Iris closed her eyes and leaned into Damien's embrace. She was no longer the girl bound by the curse. She was free. And whatever the future held, she would face it with courage, knowing that she had the strength to rebuild her life. Epilogue, A New Dawn. Months passed, and Iris's journey continued. She had found a place for herself, a life built not on the ruins of the past, but on the promise of the future. Though she still struggled at times with the loss of her old identity, she had learned to embrace the uncertainty. Each day was a new opportunity to create something beautiful from the ashes of what had come before. She had also come to realize that her journey was not just about breaking the curse, it was about discovering who she was when the past no longer defined her. And that discovery was a lifelong process, one that she would continue to explore with Damien by her side. Together, they faced the future, hand in hand, heart in heart, ready to embrace whatever challenges and joys awaited them. And as the sun rose on a new day, Iris finally understood that the true meaning of freedom was not in the absence of the curse, but in the ability to create a life of her own choosing.